As probably for many of you, our number one challenge in the past year was the war in Ukraine. In particular, and among many other things, it made us readjust our regional approach towards academic cooperation and student exchange in and with Eastern Europe. For example, we strengthened and still strengthen our presence in the Eastern European EU countries or in the South Caucasus.
The COVID-19 pandemic transforms social and economic structures with serious implications for students. It limits students from traveling, accessing their campus, and generally leads to greater cost. The backlash of commercial globalization, the lack of trust in science and in politicians, the restrictions due to the pandemic, and the rise of nationalism in some countries create a weight of doubt about the benefits of international higher education and changes the global landscape of students' mobility.
Getting back to normality following the pandemic was definitively the biggest challenge we had to face this year. It was not an easy thing to do actually, since the beneficiaries of the Erasmus program were under the skepticism of still existing health risks.
Undeniably, the war in Ukraine was an enormous challenge that the Polish academic community had to encounter last year. The majority of universities, along with Polish National Agency for Academic Exchange, had to undertake actions leading to solidarity with the Ukrainian academic environment to provide the possibility of continuing education and research in Poland.
During the past year, all of us faced a new challenge, the Ukrainian situation, which we were especially affected by as a neighboring country. As a reaction to students fleeing the country, we could successfully set up a new scholarship program within a very short period of time. COVID and what we learned from handling it and its consequences stayed with us as well.
Without doubt, the war in Ukraine was the biggest challenge for us this year. In the wake of the displacement of thousands of Ukrainian refugees, the French government firmly decided to welcome them immediately. Campus France was asked to develop a single platform to identify the training needs of Ukrainian students who have fled their country and to put them in touch with higher education institutions ready to welcome them as soon as they arrive in France or at the beginning of the academic year 2022.
In the last year, we have faced three main challenges. External ones were, of course, pandemic and war in Ukraine. This functionality of the Erasmus Plus IT tools was additional burden on our work. And internally, the staff turnover, which has been significantly higher than usually.
The Swedish Council of Higher Education has received several complex assignments lately that has put special emphasis on our role as facilitator and enabler in implementing political initiatives. This has required new ways of communicating and coordinating with our stakeholders.
In early 2022, just as we thought we were putting the COVID pandemic behind us, international cooperation in education has been disrupted by a war on the European continent. So the biggest challenge was, and still is, to constantly adapt strategies, programs, funding instruments, and to keep partners and stakeholders motivated in engaging in international cooperation also in difficult times.
The biggest challenge after COVID was to keep sessions like these, hybrid and digitalization, into our process. We think it's of the utmost importance. And what we also found, it was very hard to find good personnel. We've done some smart recruiting, and to our luck, new young colleagues come to the office. And the third one is that sister organizations like EACEA are, of course, very important. So we have become an EACEA member again.
The biggest challenge for us at ÖAD in the last couple of months was the war in Ukraine. We have had two offices in Odessa and Lviv and moved that to Uzhhorod. We also have an office in St. Petersburg that we closed down. I'm glad, however, that we were able to start a scholarship program for Ukrainian students and to help some of the refugees with accommodation in our student homes.
The biggest challenge for our organization over the last year has certainly been the war in Ukraine. Because of the proximity of the Ukraine to Estonia, but also because we share the border with the aggressor country. It has created emotions for families and friends and work colleagues we never thought is possible in 21st century. It has created also an increased workload for my colleagues who assess the diplomas and educational qualification of the refugees, and also colleagues who actually directly consult student candidates for how to continue their studies in Estonian universities.
The biggest challenge which we had and still we have is the implementation of the new Erasmus Plus priorities. Green Erasmus, participation, digitalization and inclusion. We don't want to have it only on a paper. We want a real implementation to our day-to-day activities, to projects which we managed, and also to the whole education system.
We completed a merger involving 6 organizations, and we finalized restructuring the new organization, including expanding our mandate and new locations. We have been working hard to mobilize the education sector to reactivate and strengthen their international cooperation after the pandemic, while also dealing with the war in Europe and ongoing consequences for international cooperation, as well as for refugees arriving in Norway.
The COVID pandemic required numerous adjustments, organizational, administrative, personal, and for us, one of the biggest challenges was actually how to support the beneficiaries of our mobility projects, and also at the end the final beneficiaries, I would say the mobility beneficiaries, especially those with fewer opportunities. So finding new ways to support them, new ways to understand their needs in this very difficult, challenging times was the biggest challenge for our organization.
For an organization primarily dealing with mobility of students and researchers, outgoing and incoming, we have to admit that COVID was still a big issue in the last year. And the biggest challenge was to maintain the interest in mobilities, which we are glad that we were able to keep. Of course, as we all know, in the spring, we started to face the Ukrainian refugee crisis, and we had to find solutions for Ukrainian students and researchers that suddenly appeared on the territory of Slovakia. But luckily, with universities and Ministry of Education, we could find some reasonable solutions to at least include some of them into the higher education. Of course, not everything went well, not everything was perfect, but still I think we can be proud of the achievements that we have.
Pandemic was still very strong when Russia attacked Ukraine. We were facing simultaneously 2 big problems, and we were able to change our activities rapidly.
The virtual promotion of the Italian higher education system, engagement skills to attract international students were 2 very challenging obstacles during COVID-19. The biggest challenge of the past years has been the renewal of the above-mentioned methodologies and practices to stay connected to international students at a distance while creating ties with them.
August, September, October, and the 9 months after that. We've never had a period where there have been so many multiple crises, multiple need for scholar rescue, multiple need to address student emergencies in our 100 years of history.